Good morning. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for the Equity Initiatives and Clean Energy Access Grants webinar. My name's Asia Powell, and I'm a local government liaison with the Business and Community Outreach team here at the Commission. I'm joined by Hope Chrisman, Chris Moore, Jesus Torres, and our supervisor, Steph. And we're here today to provide an overview of a proposal for a grant program that we hope will address some long-standing challenges with engagement of community-based organizations and tribal organizations at the CPUC. With this grant program, we also hope to introduce more communities to the state's clean energy programs. Stephanie, can you go back one slide, please? So let's get started with some meeting logistics. This session is being recorded. If you don't wish to be recorded, please exit the webinar. We'll let you know that the presentation slides will be available after the webinar at cpuc.ca.gov/informational webinars. We'll have that address for you at the end of the session. We are using WebEx today. Just a few tips about WebEx. We will be communicating via chat. If you would like to raise your hand to answer a question at the end of the session, we will have a Q&A session where you can actually speak to us to answer your questions. Hand is the hand icon on the bottom of the screen. It's a hand icon. You just press that and then your hand will be raised and the facilitator will call on you. We also will be communicating via chat. You can answer your questions at any time during the webinar via chat. The chat button is a little bubble icon to the right of your screen. You just click that. It'll say to everyone, you can chat it out and we can record it. If you want to chat to someone individually, you just pull their name down from the drop-down menu. If you are having any technical difficulties during the session, please chat to the host and then we can address at that time. We ask that when you are putting in something in the chat, we ask that you please don't use acronyms or abbreviations. It'll make it easier us to answer your questions. Next slide, please. So just want to let you know that, as I mentioned during this webinar, we will be taking your questions via chat, and there will be an opportunity for some people to actually speak their questions. But at any time, you can send your feedback to us via our email address, which is here on the bottom right of this slide. outreach@cpuc.ca.gov. And we'll show that again at the end. Next slide, please. So just want to walk you through the agenda that we have planned for you today. We'll start with our welcome and introductions, which we're doing now. Then we'll do a background about the Equity Initiatives and Clean Energy Access Grant Program. And then Jesus Torres will take you through an overview of the Public Participation Grant. And then Chris Moore will take you through the Equity Engagement and Education Grant and also the Clean Energy Access Grant. We'll do a question and answer session, and then we'll close out. Next slide, please. So I want to kick us off by hearing from Stephanie Green. She's the Business Program and Project Supervisor for the Business and Community Outreach team. Stephanie.
Thank you, Asia. How are you? And welcome everybody today. Thank you so much for attending. I am Stephanie Green. I'm in the Executive Division and I oversee the Business and Community Outreach Office. And we are very excited to have you join us today. Today you will be hearing about a proposed CBO tribal grant program that my team and I have been drafting for the Commission. The quality of our policies and programs is dependent upon us hearing from our communities and stakeholders like you. Your input is crucial as we design our proposed program. It has been a goal of the CPUC Executive Division to implement a CBO tribal grant program for a number of years. So we are really excited and thrilled to finally have funding to implement a program. We want to ensure that this program is going to be as effective and well-designed as possible. So to do that, we have gathered internal input from divisions throughout the commission. We received external input from many state agencies like the California Energy Commission, Air Resources Board, Strategic Goals Council, State Water Resource Boards, etc. We solicited input from community advisory groups such as the Low Income Oversight Board, the Disadvantaged Communities Advisory Group, and the Team and Changes program. We also held a CBO tribal focus group, and now today's webinar is yet another opportunity for us to receive important feedback from you, the community, as we design a grant program that will truly fit your community needs. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. And I'll turn it back to the team.
Thank you, Stephanie. All right, so now I'm just going to share a little bit of a background of the program. Next slide, please. So the Equity Initiatives and Clean Energy Access Grant Program is authorized in Assembly Bill 179, the Budget Act of 2022. The California Legislature approved $30 million to be used by the CPUC for grants to community and tribal organizations to increase participation, support equity initiatives, and provide clean energy access opportunities to hard-to-reach tribal access and functional needs and other underrepresented communities. The funds will be available for grant awards until June 30th, 2025, and the funds must be spent by June 30th, 2027. Next slide, please. As Stephanie mentioned, we did some extensive stakeholder outreach to date. This program that we're presenting today has been developed with input from state agencies and boards. Stephanie mentioned several of them, community organizations. As she said, we hosted a focus group consisting of 12 community-based organizations and tribal organizations. And we've heard from community stakeholders. And of course, today we want to hear from you. This grant program will not be complete without your feedback. So again, we want to hear from you. We want to hear from you in the chat, and we want to hear from you via our email address. And we'll send that, give that information to you at the end of the session. Next slide, please. So just want to tell you a little bit about the program. This is just an overview. As I mentioned during the agenda, my colleagues will talk to you in more detail about each of the programs. But the Equity Initiatives and Clean Energy Access Grant Program has 3 components. The first is the Public Participation Grant. The second is the Equity Engagement and Education Grant. And the third is the Clean Energy Access Grant. Proposed funding for these grants is as follows. For the Public Participation Grants, the maximum award will be $15,000 with a total available of $2.5 million. The Equity Engagement and Education Grants maximum award is $100,000 with a total available of $8 million. The Clean Energy Access Grant maximum award of $1.25 million with a total available of $17 million. There's dedicated tribal funding of $1 million, and administration comes in at $1.5 million for a total of $30 million. Next slide, please. So the eligible applicants for this program are the same regardless of program. They include California community-based organizations with a 501c3 status, the California Native American Tribe, and tribal entities, organizations incorporated under tribal law and wholly owned by the tribe, tribal Section 17 corporations, tribal utilities, and authorities operated under tribal law. Next slide, please. So now I'd like to turn it over to Jesus Torres, who will talk to you in more detail about the Public Participation Grant Program. Jesus.
Thank you, Asia, and good morning, everybody. I'm Jesus Torres, and I'm on the Business and Community Outreach team. Next slide. So the purpose of the Public Participation Grant Program is to remove financial and capacity-based barriers that organizations face when attempting to engage with matters before the CPUC. We are aware that engaging and knowing how to participate could be challenging for some community-based organizations that traditionally haven't engaged on issues under the purview of the CPUC. The organizations that do engage on a regular basis have the capacity, the know-how, and understanding of how the CPUC operates. And we'd like to expand the pool of CBOs that do this type of work. This grant program aligns closely with our Environmental and Social Justice Action Plan. So we're trying to create participation pathways to remove some of the barriers to actively engage before the CPUC. Next slide. So the total amount available for this grant is $2.5 million with the proposed cap of $15,000 per organization. Applicants may seek funding after participating in an approved activity, such as a working group, focus group, or serving as a panelist or featured speaker as part of a workshop. And we'll talk about some of those activities in the next slide. But the application will be streamlined and prompt payment will be processed in order to facilitate the application process and encourage participation. We don't want the process to apply for funds to be burdensome. It is important to note that CBOs already eligible for intervenor compensation, which is a more traditional but more complicated way to receive compensation, are not eligible to receive compensation from this grant program for the same activities. Next slide. So one of the ways we think we can use this grant to elevate diverse voices is by compensating organizations that participate in activities that solicit feedback, expertise, and lived experiences that may influence policy, services, and program design. And so on this list, you can see what we've listed. We've had working groups, focus groups, workshop as an event panelist or featured speaker, a member of an advisory board, and an en banc panelist. And there you see some of the descriptions for each. I will say that the proposed compensation for participating in these activities is $150 an hour, and that is all inclusive of what is required for engaged participation, which would include pre-meeting review of materials, meeting attendance, and any post-meeting follow-up. Next slide. Finally, for administration of the funds, applicants will note the number of hours in the activity they participated in, as well as provide proof of participation. On the slide, you can see examples of various ways applicants can show they were participating in a specific activity. So this could be in the form of meeting minutes or an attendance log, an agenda with your name on it if the applicant is serving as on a panel or as a featured speaker, or even a screenshot of a virtual meeting. We want to provide a maximum flexibility in the manner that applicants can show evidence of engagement. And now I will hand it off to Chris Moore, who will discuss our Equity, Engagement, and Education Grant Program. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Jesus. Christopher Moore, and I'm also on the local government team. I'm going to speak about our next program, the Equity, Engagement, and Education Grant Program. Next slide, please. It's a larger grant program than the public participation grant program, but they're very closely related. While the public participation grant program pays for discrete engagements, the Equity, Engagement, and Education Grant Program pays for ongoing engagement with one or more CPUC decision-making processes. Applicants will also be looked on favorably if they engage in decision-making processes with other state agencies. We hope that this program will help CBOs and tribes bring the views of their community to the CPUC during the grant term, and through this experience, build capacity to continue to appear before us through the ratepayer-funded program known as interviewer compensation, which Jesus mentioned. Next slide, please. This grant will be up to $100,000, which should cover the cost of engaging a CPUC proceeding. This funding can be used for a number of activities that are related to CPUC proceedings, including hiring staff or consultants, bringing community voices to the CPUC, or supporting other CBOs and tribes through partnership, coalition development, and engagement with the PUC. Go next slide, please. More experienced organizations can apply and propose to assist less experienced CBOs or tribes while navigating the CPUC, including the work they need to do to get intervener compensation. That said, there will be no double dipping. While grant funding is meant to pave the way to eventually claim intervener compensation, it cannot be claimed at the intervener compensation and grant funding cannot be claimed at the same time. Next slide, please. Unlike the public participation grant program, this will be a competitive grant program with funding made available in 2 cycles. We're planning to award the funding in summer of 2023 and then in the following summer of 2024. Next slide, please. We hope that this will build the basis for long-term engagement with the CPUC and pave the way to participation in the intervener compensation program. While that program has always been around, many organizations use it to fund ongoing staff and organizational capacity before the CPUC. The difficulties of learning how to learn to navigate the system have posed a challenge to many CBOs and tribes. Of course, not all CBOs and tribes will wish to appear before the CPUC on an ongoing basis. So applications will be encouraged even if your organization expects this to be a one-off engagement. And this is particularly the case when it comes to transportation proceedings where no intervener compensation is available. And we've seen a particular lack of community engagement due to this. Okay, have the next slide, please. Proposals will be scored based on the scope of engagement and how they will bring the views of an underrepresented community forward and how those views will benefit that community through informing the decision-making process. Bonus points will be awarded for participating simultaneously in other state agency decision-making processes, such as before the CEC or the Air Resources Board on energy-related decision-making. Crucial to the application is, of course, demonstrating how funding will help the organization overcome capacity constraints. Hopefully, this will build the basis for the long-term capacity to engage with the CPUC. Could I have the next slide, please? All right, now I'm going to move on to the largest of our grant programs, the Clean Energy Access Grant Program. Next slide, please. Unlike other programs, these grants are for community-facing work as opposed to agency-facing work. While agency work is important, California will not meet its climate or equity goals without the adoption of clean energy technologies by underrepresented communities. This grant category is intended to help CBOs and tribes act as trusted intermediaries. In this role, they'll bring information about state incentive programs and help their community find out how they can leverage these programs locally. Please note that this program does not pay for physical infrastructure or equipment, but is meant to assist with planning and outreach and for leveraging existing incentive programs. We go next slide, please. Due to the fact that state programs can be quite complicated and difficult to understand, this program will be implemented through a third-party technical assistance provider or providers who will provide guidance and subgrants to the community-based organizations and tribes. We sincerely hope the legislature will renew this program and allow us to expand it to a wide variety of energy programs, but with this funding, we are restricting projects to 2 CPUC programs, the Microgrid Incentive Program and Battery Backup under the Self-Generation Incentive Program. Both these measures are in response to feedback we received in a focus group with CPO and tribal representatives. The focus group participants felt that the program was too open-ended and would not result in successfully implemented projects. So I'll now go a bit more background on those 2 specific programs, the Self-Generation Incentive Program and the Microgrid Incentive Program, what they are and how this grant can be used to support them. Next slide, please. Of course, understanding the microgrid incentive program requires first understanding what is a microgrid, which is not something we come across in our day-to-day lives. Simply put, a microgrid is a smaller electric grid that can operate as part of the larger utility grid or on its own when the grid is down. In the past, you might have seen solutions such as a diesel generator for allowing homes or critical community facilities to operate when the utility grid was down. But community resources such as solar and batteries paired with control technologies can allow backup power to be provided in a cleaner and more seamless fashion. Go to the next slide, please. Unfortunately, microgrids are not cheap. CPUC is rolling out a $200 million program for vulnerable communities to help them ensure that vital community needs are supported during events such as wildfires or public safety power shutoffs. This program will be launching more or less concurrently with the Clean Energy Access Grant Program this year. Next slide, please. This program will help vulnerable communities ensure their project development needs are met. This work is important, and even with existing funds, many vulnerable communities are seen as high risk and are having a difficult time finding top-tier developers. These grants can help with community access of planning the program by providing resources for community-based organizations and tribes to work with the community to identify critical needs. And finally, and relatedly, there are a lot of local clean energy access opportunities that should be considered under the rubric of a microgrid project, and funding can be leveraged to understand and plan to leverage these opportunities. Next slide, please. The Self-Generation Incentive Program, or the SGIP, as it is commonly referred to, provides direct incentives for utility customers who install certain clean energy technologies at their property. This is utility customers, not for municipal utility customers. The incentives of this program can be used for a number of technologies, but here we're talking about home batteries to store energy. They say that there's no such thing as a free lunch, but SGIP covers most, if not all of the meal. It's intended to cover 85% to 100% of the cost of battery installation, depending on the eligibility category. Can we go next slide, please? Members of underrepresented communities may be skeptical of something that seems too good to be true, and understanding how the program works is not easy. It's maybe one of the reasons that the current equity budget for the battery backup program is undersubscribed. Substantially more money has been allocated for this category. We want to ensure that CBOs and tribes are in the place to help their communities access and benefit from it. Funding from this grant program can help with developing campaigns, materials, as well as knocking on doors and tabling as needed to reach community members. Okay, next slide, please. For both of these programs, a master grant will go from the CPUC to a third-party technical assistance provider or providers. The provider or providers will cover most of the administrative work, and will help CBOs and tribes scope and plan their project, and will ultimately provide funding. Next slide, please. We are currently working on the requirements for the technical assistance providers. Based on feedback we've had, we would like to have the providers apply as a coalition in order to ensure diverse backgrounds and expertise. We'll also be working to ensure that the funding is transparent and that the providers are capable of working throughout the entire state. Okay, thank you. Go next slide, please. I'm going to hand this back over to Stephanie. Stephanie?
Hi, let's, uh-oh. What did I just do? Oh, I just went out of, okay. So I'd like to talk about the tribes. And hopefully we have a few tribal representatives here today. The commission is really striving to ensure that we consider tribal stakeholders and tribal interests in our policies and decision-making. Our tribal consultation and tribal land policies are both examples of that. And to ensure that the tribes are able to have full access and take advantage of the grant programs and participate in them, we have earmarked $1 million in funds for the tribes. And the way we're foreseeing it is, out of that $1 million, 100,000 would be made available for public participation grants. $250,000 would be made available for the second type, the equity, education, and engagement grants. And then the remaining 650,000 would be for the clean energy access grants. But we are open to feedback. I hope some of the tribes are here today. I will also be presenting the grant program at a tribal summit en banc that we are having on March 2nd up at the Blue Lake Rancheria, so you can hear some more then. But if anybody has feedback from the tribes or in general, I'd be happy to hear it. But that's how we are planning to address the interests and needs of the tribes. And I'm going to go on to the next slide. And it looks like our next slide is to go into our question and answer session.
Yes, thank you, Stephanie. So thank you to everyone who has put questions in the chat. We will be responding to some of those questions. So if you do have a question, please feel free to go ahead and put it in the chat and we will get started. I just want to let you know also, just a reminder that we will take written comments for any feedback you have on the design of the programs to date. Those written comments should be sent to outreach@cpuc.ca.gov by 5 p.m. on February 27th. And then we'll take those questions, we'll review them, and consider your feedback for any additional modifications of the program. All right, let's get started with the question and answer session. Omar asked, our family resource centers is under the fiscal umbrella of a school district. Since we are not a self-standing community-based organization, are we still eligible for these grants? Chris, did you want to take that one?
Sorry, I was looking for it in the chat, but I couldn't find it. So could you repeat that?
Yes, it said their organization is under the umbrella of a school district. Since they're not a self-standing community-based organization, are they still eligible?
No, under this, as we have the eligibility criteria, it's 501c3s or tribes are eligible.
Yeah, it doesn't allocate money for local government, unfortunately.
Yeah, and while we're sympathetic, but the legislation's clear on it's community-based organizations or representing underrepresented communities or tribes.
That leads on to our next question. For the purposes of this program, this is from Joe. I'm sorry, from James. For the purposes of this program, how is the CPUC defining community-based organization?
Do you want to pull up the slide? I mean, we have it. It's 501c3. I mean, I think as it's pretty known, there is actually no formal definition of what the difference between a nonprofit and a community-based organization. So this is going to be reflected in the scoring criteria, how much the benefit to the project to an underrepresented community there will be. And that's going to include them making the case with demographics and showing that they have a connection to that community and have done past work in the community. But that will show up in the scoring criteria because there's no, at least as far as I'm aware, there's no formal definition of what a community-based organization is. We've also had instruction to try to keep this in terms of, we're going to be looking at the projects and to try to keep this not rule out organizations except those that are ruled out by the legislation ahead of time.
Okay, this next question is from Melissa. Can CBOs Can CBOs that receive intervenor compensation for work in open commission proceedings receive funding under this program for work that is otherwise not eligible for intervenor compensation? For example, serving on a panel at an event that is not part of an open proceeding.
I can take that, Asia. So yes, as written, nothing precludes experienced CBOs from applying, and by experienced CBOs, I mean those receiving intervenor compensation. However, keep in mind that the purpose of these funds is to encourage those CBOs that are not actively engaging, that aren't receiving intervenor compensation.
Yeah, I would add that experienced CBOs, we have a pathway if they're helping other CBOs to become part who don't have that experience. There's a pathway there, but not for other
funding for those. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Erica asked, will these slides be shared with us? Yes, the slides will be available on our landing page, which you will see at the end of the session. We'll get you that email, I'm sorry, that web address. So yes, the slides will be shared. This is from Joyce. Please elaborate what you mean by build capacity. What activities or expenditures are eligible for reimbursement?
Okay, we have a more sophisticated list. The capacity we were working up. I'm going to try to find the definition we were going with was from the Strategic Growth Council. I don't have it, unfortunately, before me right now. But in terms of, so generally speaking, this is going to be getting consultants and stuff in order to get a better understanding of the process, hiring people to be working on the proceedings, purchase of technology and the like for greater participation. So actually a fairly wide breadth of activities.
Also from Joyce, how does the scoring criteria and application process ensure that those who need the funding the most receive it? What if some groups have more access to other grant funding? How is that considered, since they may have more access to funding?
So we would expect that those on the capacity side, that those groups would already have. We are looking at how this will help you overcome capacity constraints, and we expect that would and bring a new perspective. If those other groups are active, it's going to be harder for them to make the case. Overall, this is a difficult, this is a difficult problem. There isn't any perfect fix for this. So we've had instruction overalls to try to get the money spread around. This came up in our focus group, simply because those who often have better resources are better at getting before us and better ways of doing that. So we've been instructed to try to spread the money around and try to get multiple grants out there in order to leave some opportunities for smaller groups.
Right. And just remember, we are taking feedback. So if you have suggestions on how we can attack some of these challenges, please submit your comments.
Yeah, if you have thoughts on the scoring rubric, which is what you're asking about, absolutely submit them in your comments. But we really are trying to encourage new entrants, CBOs and tribes that haven't engaged. That's a lot of our emphasis, is really expanding the participation pool.
Let's see the next comment. From Deborah, can we apply for this grant? I think she means the Clean Energy Access Grant and the Public Participation Program Grant.
Yes. Mhm.
This is from James. Could you provide an example of the type of project funded under the Clean Energy Access Grants? If it's not for hardware and project cost, then what might be an example of what is funded?
So in terms of the example was, so for example, with the self-generation incentive program, it would be work the technical assistance providers to come up with a campaign to reach your community, identifying, households that would likely benefit, and then actually developing materials, and, going out and speaking to those households and trying to get signups. In regards to microgrid incentive program, it would be assisting with development costs, as well as CBOs going out and working, basically canvassing the community, having town halls in order to identify, what critical community needs are that should be supported by the microgrid, such as, location, what's in terms of setting up a community center that's going to have backup power, where it should be located, and what needs it is going to need to support.
Okay, thank you. The next question is from Kelly. I'm a little confused on how the public participation reimbursement works. Do we apply to be included in a pool of organizations who can submit for reimbursement? Is it reimbursement guaranteed?
Yeah, I can take that. So applicants that would like to join a working group or be part of a panel, for example, can apply for funding. So there isn't a special pool, and then they get chosen for a working group. Really, it's just for those working group or those applicants that want to join something or be part of something, but can't because they don't have, because they won't be paid for their time and their expertise. Now they are more, well, we are hoping that they would be more motivated and incentivized to participate, because now they'll get paid for their time and expertise. Does that answer? I hope that answers that.
I think you might want to talk more about the reimbursement factor, like it is a reimbursement.
Yeah, so the hourly rate is at $150 per hour. So that includes everything, right? So pre-meeting, reviewing the materials before the panel or a focus group or working group, attending the actual meeting. And sometimes for some of these activities, there's post-meeting follow-up. So that includes that. And so after the activity, they may apply for funding. The application is very streamlined, 1 or 2 pages, and then they would submit that for funding. Is funding guaranteed? Very likely, unless there's some anomaly that we're seeing, or maybe there's some showing evidence of participation is not there. But if someone can show that they attended a meeting, very likely we don't see an issue with receiving funding under this program.
Next question is from Brian. Would either of these programs support installing solar exterior lighting with battery storage at a multifamily apartment building, for example?
I think that if there were some of the planning costs associated with microgrid, with setting up a microgrid, so it wouldn't pay for the infrastructure side. But if you could, if it were in the context of a microgrid incentive program project, there'd be room for covering some of those planning costs.
Next from Cynthia. How big should a microgrid be? A neighborhood?
I mean, we have in terms of the size of that, we actually have a couple people from the microgrid that the program on. I'm not an expert on microgrids, and I believe it really depends on the specific project. So it could be a neighborhood, but you're going to be looking to support the needs of, how you scope that's probably going to depend on the very specific circumstances.
All right. All right. That is all that we have. Oh, let me see. I do have something from Jessica. The microgrid incentive program is supposed to have a technical assistance grant. How did this program funding align with the proposed MIP technical assistance funds?
I mean, obviously that's going to be, this was proposed. So this is overall, this focus was proposed by the Energy Division Director, Lou Wam. So it's going to be coordinated. So it won't duplicate. It will be, but that's obviously the specific details are going to be worked out with the Energy Division.
This is from Fatima. Is tribal funding also available for non-federally recognized tribes?
Yes, our expectation it would be that California tribes would be able to apply.
Yeah, it's specifically in the legislation we have. I don't keep digging through the slides here, and those will be available. But we have it's defined by the Public Resources Code.
Yes.
What tribes are eligible.
But yes, California tribes will be eligible.
This is from Jennifer. Are 501c6 organizations available? And unfortunately, not for this opportunity. This is from Anna. Can we apply to all 3 grant programs?
Yeah. There's no exclusion from applying for the different grant programs.
This is from Doreen. Would a nonprofit regional convener be able to apply on behalf of several CBOs at once?
My understanding is yes. I think that would be within the scope of the program.
Okay, Cynthia, we will get to your question just as soon as we get through the chat. Thanks for your patience. Gabriela said, are 501c3s with engagement with other CBOs and local governments that engage with CPUC eligible? She says, basically, we represent local jurisdiction and various smaller communities. Does that rule us out from funding?
So this is, I'm sorry. So let's try to find that.
It says, are 501c3s with engagement with other CBOs and local governments that engage with CPUC eligible?
Eligible with other CBOs.
I think as long as they're 501c3s.
Yeah, as long as they're 501c3s, if they lean heavily on the CBO side, I mean, you could talk if it's fully local, mostly local governments. I think that would probably hurt you in the scoring rubric. But if it's bringing a number of CBOs, yeah, that would be.
This is Erica. How is the CPUC promoting information about this program? For example, this webinar did not feel widely shared.
We maintain our own database and we've sent it out to everyone there. We've asked the CEC, we've LIOB, DACAG to share. if you have other forums, we're happy to use them, but we've been sharing them as widely as possible with everyone we know who can share them. So if you have a suggestion for other lists, we're happy to use those as well.
Yes, please send those comments to our outreach email address, and we'd be happy to take those. This is from Kristen. Are you concerned if these organizations pay individual participants that do not have a legal way to get paid?
I don't, so if they're a 501c3, they should have a legal way to get paid. I'm not understanding why they wouldn't have a
We
legal
may
way.
need to take that one offline and get some more details. Based on the way it was phrased, I'm not sure we can clearly answer.
Because at least for the public participation grant, the funds go to the organization, right? So it's the 501c3 is a legal entity. So beyond that, I'm not sure. But if this is about our equity and engagement grant or the clean energy access, I think it's the same. It goes to a 501c3 organization, not an individual. But we can follow up on that question too.
From Cynthia, I am the NAACP Pasadena area rep. I have a question about a microgrid proposal we may submit for community solar in a low-income area of our city. Again, Cynthia, we will get to you. Please, thank you for your patience. This is from Caroline. For the Clean Energy Access Grant, it sounds like covered activity, outreach and planning for battery microgrid system implementation. Is that correct?
Outreach and planning. That's for implementation, and I'd say for the battery, it's mostly for to try to get subscriptions.
From Christine, public participation program. Can you please explain when this program will start? It wasn't clear.
That goes to our closing. And
Yes, it does. It does. We're
our key
gonna go through
dates.
we're going to go through the calendar. So thank you. Thank you for the question. This is from Fred. Hi, and thank you for today's presentation. Is the 1 million in tribal funding considerations to be distributed amongst all California tribes?
Yes, it is. Any
They will
California
have to-
tribe can apply, and so that 1 million is for tribes across the state. It does not preclude them also from applying for the general one, but at a minimum, we have 1 million that will solely be made available just for the tribes. And any tribe that meets the eligibility requirement in California can apply.
This is from Melissa. This is a follow-up to the earlier question about public participation funding. If an experienced intervener cannot access this funding for work that is not otherwise eligible, example, participating on a panel that is not part of an open proceeding, the ability to assist, the ability of these experienced parties to assist in thought leader types of events may be constrained. Is that viewed as a concern?
Well, I think, yeah, as I mentioned, nothing precludes experienced CBOs from applying. Nothing is written saying that they cannot apply right now. The way it's written now says that those who are receiving intervener compensation for the same activity cannot apply for these funds. So there's nothing in the book saying they can't apply. But I'll repeat once again that the purpose of these funds really is for those CBOs that are not actively engaging. So if there is a good argument for being a thought leader on a panel, we can take down a case by case basis. But I would like to see those to be more of a. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I was saying that it may be constrained. I think we've had some, because there is I believe a concern was brought up around some energy efficiency and stuff, is that there is a drop off in participation on some activities once the proceeding is closed. That's not the intention of this program, to fund experienced interveners with participating in those activities that currently aren't eligible for intervener compensation. But if they were acting as a thought leader in the context of specifically helping other helping underrepresented communities come forward, that's what they would have to be. That is what their application for the engagement grant would have to do. They would actually have to be actively bringing those other CBOs forward.
And that wouldn't be under the public participation grant. That would be under the equity and engagement grant.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, this is from Lorenzo. Please give us an overview of your outreach office at the CPUC, how many staff, your mission, main activities, and how you interact with other offices like Energy Division. Stephanie, you want to take that one?
Talking about our team. The outreach and business community, the business and community outreach office has three main areas. One is our supplier diversity program. And we also have this business, small business and DVB program. And then of course we have our local government and community outreach, as well as our tribal liaison and tribal community outreach. So that all falls within our group. We have a total of 12 that we should have on our team. We have a couple of vacancies right now, 8 of which are in the community, local government community role, such as Asia, Hope, Jesus, and Chris here today. So they're basically half of that team, and they cover the state, in the entire state. And we interface with all divisions across the commission on a pretty much regular, routine, daily basis as issues and topics germane to our communities come up, and they fall in all of the industries, whether it be water, rail, energy, communications. So we really cross the entire commission in terms of our interaction.
Thanks, Stephanie. This is from Doreen. Will all three programs be released under one combined RFP, asking applicants to identify which ones they are applying for, or will each of the three programs be released under separate RFPs?
They will. No, they won't. Specifically as Clean Energy Access is going to be a separate RFP going to technical assistance providers. So yeah, and then in terms of the separate, we will advertise we'll advertise the public participation program, but it's going to be rolling, and there's in terms of actually applying for it, it's going to be much less formal than the equity engagement program, which will have a more formal RFP.
This is from Erica. Can you please repeat the timeline as to when the grant application process will be open and when it will close? I would say we don't have those exact dates at this time. But Chris, you did have some information on your slide. Did you want to go back to that?
Yeah, well, that was for the equity engagement. Do we have that other slide? Well, I guess that's the next step. So I guess we're hoping to get these programs formed by resolution later this spring, and then that should open the way to begin accepting funding public participation grants, and then put the RFP out for the equity engagement. The Clean Energy Access, it's going to take a while to get the technical assistance providers in place. So that's been a later development. So that may still be some time before the Clean Energy Access is available. But the the time frame will, once the public participation is open, people can apply on a rolling basis up until June 30th, 2025. Equity engagement, we're hoping for 2 cycles, one this summer and one next summer. The clean energy access, once that master grant is been issued, then people will be able to apply for assistance up until and spend funds up until June 30th, 2027.
This is Joyce. A CPUC proposed decision was mailed on 2/9/23 for consideration at a March 16th CPUC voting meeting. I'm not sure what that refers to. If you want to give us more information about that.
The microgrid
Joyce. Oh, microgrid, sorry, okay.
program. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Okay. This is from tonight. Christopher has mentioned that the equity engagement and education grant will be competitive. My question is, will you be providing technical assistance to small CBOs to level the field? It seems like you are already offering technical assistance to the Clean Energy Access Program, and it will be great if you can do the same for all the grants.
The plan right now is to not put the equity engagement through a technical assistance provider. We will be providing staff level. We can provide staff level support with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, we anticipate there will be resources but it would be staff.
This is from Rick. Is there assistance funds for the marketing campaign to promote programs like SGIP, microgrids at a county level?
If that's county, I mean, governments would, the county government would not be eligible, but a community-based organization that was active at a county level would be eligible.
And remember, if you have suggestions, please send your comments. You know, we need your comments to continue to develop the program. So please, if you have comments, send them in. Okay. Joseph, can you please let Cynthia on the bridge? She has been waiting.
I'm sorry, Asia,
Cynthia, she has her hand raised. Cynthia Kennedy.
one moment.
Thank you.
And while we're waiting, I'll just reinforce what Asia was saying. This is a proposal, so we are looking for feedback as we continue to refine and finalize this. And you'll see some of the dates that we show you that it will go for a commission vote. But we're absolutely wanting to get as much input from all of you as possible, because you guys are the ones who are going to want to take advantage of it. So we're trying to design it with you in mind. But if we don't hear from you, we can't do that.
Hi, this is Cynthia Kennedy. I was unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, good. Thanks so much. First of all, thank you for this program. This is tremendous. I thought maybe I could ask you, I could explain what we're trying to do here in Pasadena and ask you what funds would apply to what parts of this, if that's all right. So in Pasadena, we have a publicly owned utility company. I'm the climate justice chairperson for the NAACP Pasadena, and we've been plotting out the possibility of a community solar microgrid program that would help a particular low-income neighborhood in Pasadena, which is Northwest Pasadena. And as we understand the way it would work, we would first need to do a feasibility study, and we would need to engage technical assistance to do the feasibility study, and that study would scope out how big, where we would actually have the solar installation, what institutions would be involved, the scope, the cost, those kinds of feasibility issues. Second stage, as we understand it, is the design of the actual microgrid. We'd have to have the collaboration with Pasadena Water and Power, which, as some of you probably know, is not subject to CPUC jurisdiction. It's a publicly owned utility. I hope that's not a problem.
I
I
think
think we'd have
it
to
may
defer
be,
that.
unfortunately. We have some expert, we do have a couple of the energy division people who correspond online, but generally speaking, because
Yeah.
these programs use ratepayer dollars, they don't
It's-
fund projects in municipally owned utility districts.
That's correct. It is an issue, but I would love for Joyce from that, maybe, or someone from Energy Division to see if they wanted to add anything.
Oh, that's very disappointing. If that's the case, you mean just because we're in Pasadena, we wouldn't be able to apply?
Yes.
Ooh,
It
okay.
is,
What if
munis
we
are not
don't
eligible.
What if we don't engage PWP? What if we are just working on a community solar project? Maybe not a microgrid, maybe just, a complex of apartment buildings, or we have a housing project.
Cynthia, for the sake of the audience, I think this is a very specific question, and I think perhaps we should take this offline, because I think you're really getting into some nuances of your specific situation. So I don't want to spend everybody's time on a specific scenario for your area.
Well,
But-
it's pretty much related to exactly the purpose of your program, I think. Let's put aside the utility company part of it, just
Okay.
the feasibility study and the design. Let's say we were in San Francisco or someplace, some other location. Would that fall under funding for the microgrid incentive program to work with a technical assistance provider who would contract with the NAACP that would then do the feasibility study and the design? And then the third phase that we have in mind is outreach to the community to explain what we're doing and educate people and get people involved. And then the fourth phase is the actual implementation, the installation. And I'm hearing from you that there's no funding on these programs for the actual solar installation, for example, or the batteries themselves.
In terms of that, the batteries, like the battery, that's because the utility, investor-owned utility customers pay for their ratepayer dollars are going for those. It's only implemented in investor-owned utility territories. So in terms of how with Pasadena, or say with something like LADWP, they have their own programs which are paid for by their own ratepayers. So the similar situation is that Pasadena ratepayers wouldn't have to pay for batteries or microgrids outside of Pasadena.
What about the feasibility study and the design of the program?
In terms of the rest of the grant funding itself, that's legislatively, that's given to us by the legislature, but the requirements are for engagement with our decision-making processes. So you could potentially get money to engage with the PUC if there were something of relevance to underrepresented communities that was before the PUC. But in terms of the funding, it's also for outreach on clean access programs, which would be, these are ratepayer funded, investor-owned utility ratepayer funded programs. So there's unfortunately not much of a nexus.
Well, let's say I was in LA County. We do have Altadena, which our NAACP covers. LA County or unincorporated LA County. Would these programs cover any of the four phases that I'm talking about?
Yeah, there's plenty of Edison you know, territory in LA County. So there's, in terms of LA County itself, there's plenty of areas that are eligible in LA County,
Yeah.
because Edison covers a fair amount of LA County.
So we could apply for a feasibility study, for example, that would be under which of these grants?
If you were looking at there'd be a couple. You could look at you could be eligible for all these grants. It sounds like you're more interested in community projects. So you'd probably be interested in the Clean Energy Access grants.
The third one.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the next question is from Jamie. Can a 501c3 apply for the equity engagement grant work with non-501c3 orgs to build their capacity to engage at the CPUC?
They'd be able to engage the capacity. I mean, the CBO, especially if they were the lead on this, would be able to, you know, find ways to find other, you know, in terms of building capacity, they would be able to do that and work with other organizations, including, you know, paying private consultants or the like in order to build that capacity.
This is from Centro La Familia in Fresno. Will Q&As be made available for us to reference as we move along the application process?
Yes. The application process shall include an FAQ and documents to help you. Technical assistance will be provided.
This is from Bobby. How will the third-party entity provide technical assistance for the Clean Energy Access grants be selected?
It'll be through a competitive process, an RFP.
This is from Sandy. Please distribute your slides. We will have the slides available on our landing page. Information about that just coming up shortly. This is from Fatima. What tracking and metrics will the PUC be considering to measure program success?
So in terms of, I mean, in terms of looking at, this is, I take it this is for the Clean Energy Access. I think that, you know, there we're going to be looking, it's going to depend on the specific project. Some of that is going to be put up by the third-party technical assistance providers. But in terms of, say, especially with the self-generation incentive program, we're going to be looking at contacts. We're going to be looking at and converting those into subscriptions. Microgrid projects is going to be, they're going to be more open.
From Sandy, how do we public participation program application? That information is not available yet. We are still developing the program, but once we have that information, we will make it widely available. Michael Prado, who selects your technical assistance provider?
We'll select that through a competitive process.
This is from James. Wouldn't areas which are in the unincorporated county areas and which have CBOs working in those areas be eligible for one or more of these programs?
Yes, they would be. If they're served by the utility.
Yeah.
From Michael, who selects, oh, we said that, who selects the technical assistance provider? I think we said that would be through a competitive RFP. This is from Amari. Will there be further webinars once the draft program guidelines are released?
Mhm.
Yes, there will be.
Yes.
All right, so that takes us all the way through the chat. If anybody would like to speak their question, this is the opportunity. Please raise your hand. Again, the hand icon is in the middle of your screen. We'll give that just a minute if anybody wants to speak their comment. I do not really see any hands. I do not see any hands, so we have Michael Prado. Joseph, can we let Michael speak? Prado?
Hi, Michael. This is Joe Haga. I sent you an unmute request. You should have control of your microphone.
And can you hear me now?
Yes, you can.
I guess my question would be, how new is this program? Is it barely starting?
Never
we
had
are-
one before.
Cindy,
It's brand new. We're developing it now. And this is a part of the development process. So yes,
Right.
it's
Okay, thank you. I'm glad to be part of it. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak their question? Please raise your hand. All right, I don't see any other hands raised. Let's go to our next slide. Next slide. So we touched on this a little bit, but we do have some key dates we wanted to share. The next milestone is comments on the draft program. Again, we encourage you and urge you to send us your feedback, your ideas by February 27th at 5 p.m. The next milestone is a draft resolution will be available for public comment. We expect that to happen in late March. We will have a public application workshop tentatively scheduled for mid-May. And then round one of applications we're hoping will be open in late May. Next slide. So again, we want to hear from you. Send your written comments to outreach@cpuc.ca.gov by 5 p.m. on February 27th. The presentation slides will be available at our cpuc.ca.gov informational webinar site. We will also have a recording of this presentation there as well. We expect the information to be there within a week. The slides will be available sooner than that, but the recording will be there within about a week. Next slide, please. So we just want to thank everyone for your attendance. Thank you for your interest and your comments and feedback. And again, if you have any questions for us, you can send them to the outreach mailbox at outreach@cpuc.ca.gov. Thank you all for your attendance today.